So let's talk about The School for Good and Evil. So basically, last night I watched The School for Good and Evil, based off of the novel, I think by, I can't remember, Simon or what. But basically, it's a Netflix film that is a, fantasy film, teen, young adult fantasy film. It's about these two girls named Sophie and Agatha, who basically get isekai'd into, oh god, I can't believe I used the term isekai. They basically get transported to the place where fairy tales are made of, basically. At least according to the headmaster of the school, played by Lawrence Fishburne in this movie. It's basically like the place where people get trained to either be good or bad, pure evil or pure good. And that's basically the main premise. So basically, I want to talk about how I felt about the film and what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, of course. And of course, if you like more of this stuff, please like and subscribe. So let's get into it. Like I said before, this is a Netflix film that was released, I think, earlier this month in October or whatnot. And it kind of plays off like I want to say maybe like a little bit of horror. Not really, kind of, sort of, maybe. I don't know. But ultimately it's like a young adult YA teen fantasy film, which plays along the same lines as, other films on Netflix like Do Revenge. And that's honestly kind of my best comparison to make when it comes like how the story of the film actually goes. So basically, like I said, it starts out with these two girls that are kind of outcasts in their own way, Sophie and Agatha. Agatha comes from more of a witch-like family. Sophie comes from a family that's, of course, poor, and she wants to be a princess. She believes that she is a motherfucking princess, and she is determined. Agatha is the best friend who basically wants to protect Sophie. It feels like almost at all costs. And, she's more the reserved one who, of course, is bullied because of the potential for her being a witch. And her family has been a witch family as well. And they unlikely bonded over the fact that Sophie's mom died, and Agatha was kind of the only person that was there for her. So over this time, I'm going to take this off because I'm marked. So it leads to a lot of shenanigans. Based off like this Hogwarts-like school that is like been rumored to be the source of all fairy tales, and basically trains all those people to change the world for either good or for evil, whichever one comes first. I guess I have to mention the very first thing you see that they explain is the story between the two brothers. That is one of the overarching plots of this film. Not gonna lie, I only remember Rafal's name, but I'm going to put the other brother's name up here. So basically, this whole thing started because of good and evil having to basically coexist in order for balance to be truly achieved in the world. So I thought that was a really cool thing to explore with these brothers. Insert name here, and Rafal. One of them's obviously for good, and one of them's obviously for evil. And Rafal, being the rambunctious one, is always want to fight. He's bored of just existing. He wants to fight. He wants it all. In stereotypical villain fashion, wants everything for himself. So they fight after they just fought, and this kind of feels like a fight to the death in a sort of way. So it seems to like be like Rafal is killed accidentally when he falls off a cliff. And then we skip to Sophie and Agatha. So they get taken away after hearing a story about someone else who got taken away by this really creepy figure that I was like, bro, if it wasn't for the fact that I knew this is CGI, that I will actually kind of like be, kind of scared, not even gonna lie. But it was the kind of scary figure that takes him away and then kind of goes on from there. But the gag is that they get put in different spots. So instead of Sophie going to be the princess that she's always wanted to be, she gets dropped into the School of Evil, and the School of Good gets Agatha. So they spend majority of the time trying to make people believe, like the headmasters, the professors, and all of that, believe that they were dropped in the wrong school. But as it turns out, mistakes don't happen in the School of Good and Evil. There are no mistakes here, in boxing to say. And as the story goes along, you'll see like there's a whole bunch of hilarity ensues. A whole bunch of teenage debauchery, of course, stuff like that. And the story gets way bigger and more complex as it goes on, as most high fantasy type settings do. That's kind of basically the gist of a lot of the plot. The things you can say is like it gives, a lot of friendship, a lot of seeing the world as complex and not just one way, trying to open your mind. Those are the kinds of themes that permeate throughout the movie, and I think throughout the books as well, that I really appreciate. And I think overall this is like a pretty decent watch. Granted, it is a streaming movie, and you can tell that this was made on a streaming budget and for a streaming audience, because a lot of the cinematography, as I've noticed, they're kind of standard, so to speak. There are some really, really cool shots that you'll see in later on in the film, and there's a pretty cool shot in the beginning. But parts of the rest of the film are very normal, if that makes sense. It's very normal, and there's nothing wrong with it being normal. It's just like you can tell that this may be someone who is more of a somewhat experienced cinematographer, but it's kind of like keeping it safe, if that makes sense. So that's not bad at all. Hey, so the special effects, though, I think that's going to be a point of contention for a lot of people, as there are some points where the special effects looked like it was just layered on top instead of blended in. So it's going to look like they just kind of slapped some special effects on top of everything. And there are other moments where everything seems so seamless and blended in. There are some blood effects that I really did like, that were pretty elaborate, pretty phenomenally cool. But there are other times where that same blood effect felt very fake, which, of course, the CGI, of course, is going to be fake. But you can tell that they're trying hard to actually make it work. Like, when I saw the trailer for this, I didn't really have that much hopes for it. I just knew that I was like, oh, this is gonna be so bad, I want to watch it. And honestly, I was not disappointed. It was, it gives DCOM which is kind of funny because one of the main characters that plays Agatha is, I think, a Disney star in her own right. So that is kind of funny. So basically what this gives is like, it's kind of like Hogwarts, Harry Potter meets Disney Descendants meets like High School Musical, except without the musical part, but with the drama. That kind of what it gives. And I just feel like, yeah, I feel like, okay, I want to talk about the casting right quick. I feel like the casting was pretty decent, and especially Sophie, because my girl knew how to play a bad bitch. Like the flip was switched, and she was a bad bitch from beginning to end. She knew what she wanted. Agatha, I really liked her character because she was actually the good one. And it also kind of ventures into kind of sort of magical Negro. That is because the whole time you see the film is basically Agatha helping Sophie achieve her dreams while trying to, you know, kind of distance herself away from hers. And I'm not the biggest fan of that because it's such a tired trope. It is such a tired trope. And I believe that they could have done a little bit better when it comes to the writing of that. But it also could be a, you know, thing from the novel itself, where Agatha is always helping out Sophie, even though Sophie doesn't necessarily like reciprocate that. And you can say that Sophie gets lost in the sauce a lot in this film. She is driven so much by her need to change the world, a la her mother, and her innate need to just be kind of sort of the center of attention, that part times she comes off as very, not gonna say unlikable, because there are some moments where I was really rooting for Sophie, especially when she goes into her quarters and like she basically fights in self-defense, mind you. She basically fights one of the other characters, Hester. I don't know if I liked her until later on, but I'll talk about that in a little bit, because Hester and her friends, when Sophie became a bad bitch and embraced her evilness, as they say, with the makeover, Sophie basically became Regina George. Like, let's be honest, she became Regina George from Mean Girls and had her plastics, or Golf Girls, along with you. Speaking of Golf Girls, the way that they split the good school of good and the school of evil in this film felt very golf versus prep, which is also a classic trope on its own. I'm not gonna say it's tired, because the way that that allegory was kind of being done felt pretty interesting. I wouldn't say necessarily fresh, but it was an interesting take on how high fantasy and normal teen shows kind of mix together and coexist in that aspect. So I like that. The professors, I was a pretty big fan. Like, played by Charlize Theron, who I didn't even realize was her until I saw the credits. And Kerry Washington, who I can always tell Kerry Washington in a role. Like, she just got that face. They kind of were showing bits and pieces of like the complicated nature of the actual good and actual evil, because Miss Kerry Washington, Miss Dovey, Professor Dovey, she had her moments where she was kind of like, why aren't you following the rules with Agatha? And Agatha's like, girl, do you not see how messed up this stuff is? Like, the way that Agatha was basically seen through everyone's bullshit for so long, and I'm just like, y'all overrode her. Like, she's OP, and I'm here for it. I love seeing black women that are OP. I love seeing black characters that are just straight up OP. So I'm here for that. Even though it's like, bruh, you're giving magical Negro, but what's up. I do, like I said, I like the professors. Michelle Yeoh was giving such a great performance as well. Talking about her smiling, beautification, all of that. So yeah, that was part of the schools, like uglification, beautification, and all of the obvious parallels. The parallels were like so obvious. The differences were so obvious, and it's just like, we get it. They're both evil and goth, but it was evil and goth, and good and prep. Like, we get it. Of course, like, whenever you see good side, and I agree, the good side seems extremely shallow because it falls into all of those Mean Girl-esque tropes of like, oh yeah, you got these very shallow, snobbish good girls that all they want is their prince, all they want is the man, and any kind of rejection to that is just not okay. And of course, that also goes with fairy tales. It's like, oh, I gotta find my friend Prince Charming. Actually, speaking of Prince Charming, I am so upset at how they treated my boy Gregor. My little clumsy king was just so wasted. I'm not gonna say he's wasted. He was no. He was wasted. I wish they could have done more with him, and I feel like they could have done way more with him as a character. But no, thanks to Tedros, he basically got after he made those three fails, and basically got turned to nothing. And that part was exposed whenever we saw more of Agatha and her actual power. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so I feel conflicted about Rafal as a character. As a villain, he felt very textbook villain, almost like Scooby-Doo-like to me. Like, it was like his intentions were obvious. He was like, oh, I'm trying to destroy shit. I'm trying to fuck shit up. And while I appreciate that just straight honesty of like, oh yeah, I'm just trying to mess things up, it still is like the way that it was done, by form of obvious manipulation. And as you'll see later on in the film, that he basically is the headmaster. Like, he is shown to actually have killed his brother and taken on his identity, since they were twins and whatnot. And I just realized I think he played a double role. I think the actor did play a double role, if I remember correctly. Oh my god, I didn't think about that. I like that. I like the fact that he played a double role, because it's like he did that shit. But I still feel like Rafal is a okay villain. I feel like his defeat felt a little bit too easy, too clean. So I do feel like there's going to be a bit of Rafal in the next movie, if they do a next movie, which they obviously set up. They set up at the very end in the form of Tedros. All these characters, I felt like, were driven by these themes, and the themes of the book and the film felt like it was like driving all of these characters, instead of just like having these characters be more fleshed out on their own. Granted, with these like tropes and everything in set and play, using all of the teen makeover tropes, the teen jock versus prep versus golf versus all of that shit, like those are kind of overdone, but I think it was kind of like a decent fresh take on those tropes in this genre in this film. Do I believe it's a pretty good watch? It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. It was a bit long, but I think the runtime was kind of justified because you don't really feel the length of the movie. You don't really feel it like other movies of that length, whereas like you can feel time dragging along. I didn't really feel that dragging aspect of it. I felt very engaged most of the time whenever I was watching. So like it was like the interesting characters, the interesting, themes that play. And part of my favorite aspects was some of the fight scenes were pretty cool. Like, especially this one shot towards the end where Agatha comes and saves the day with her new, like, her sword skills and all of that, with the help of a dying Sophie. And the way that the camera turns and it just feels like just one fluid motion, and just the way that the blood just kind of slashes through or fall, and all of that blood just like spills out, and it's like blood magic fashion, and the way that he kind of turns into black feathers as well, kind of, and also in his one fluid motion. I just thought that was my favorite shot of the whole film. Like that, I just thought that was beautiful. The supporting characters I also found to be interesting. Like I said, I didn't care too much about Hester until the end. There was great diversity, I agree, with these films though. Even though the way that they're written were my favorite, the visual representation was phenomenal. One of the main supporting cast is Kiko, who, okay, I found it weird that like she has like a Japanese name, but it looks like she was wearing modified hanbok. So that was an interesting choice in the fact that they were able to show more traditional clothing as well as splitting up like clothing based off like good and evil and all of that, and the evers and the nevers and all of that. I do agree. I do feel like that was a good choice, even though the way that it kind of separated her from everyone else was like kind of a weird choice, but it was just kind of like pretty decent representation, at least when it comes to the fashion of the time. Everyone else was very Victorian, very of that era and all of that too. So I was like, okay, that was cool, but very diverse, like racially. When it comes to queer representation, non-existent. But a lot of these fairy tales are defined by heteronormative ideals anyway, so that I really wasn't expecting anything of that, of queer representation, so I was like, whatever. So overall, I guess like last thing to talk about is Tedros, because Tedros seems to be like becomes like the most complicated character in this next to Sophie, and it's weird, like love quadruple or whatever, I guess because he's King Arthur's son or whatever. But it's also the fact that Tedros is such a complicated character in the fact that he was always on the narrow. But Agatha and to a somewhat lesser extent Sophie has really shown him how things are not as black and white as it seems. Most of these the good kids are taught that good is always good defends, and evil's always been taught to fight. But this whole ordeal with Sophie and Agatha coming in and essentially fucking things up without trying to fuck things up, it basically kind of unlocked a whole line of thinking in him that I feel like kind of carries a bit of weight, especially when you can tell that even though it feels like it comes from out of nowhere, it kind of doesn't. That the very end of the movie, it gets set up that Tedros is going to be basically the villain of the next movie, based off the obsession that gets formed. It feels like for Agatha via his eye-opening experience, and it feels like he obviously doesn't really know what to do with that, teenagers. So it's kind of like, oh, obsession. So this is gonna obviously set up for the next film. And while I think I'm excited for it, I kind of want to read the books just to see how it worked. I think that one thing that also kind of comes into the casting is the fact that Agatha is kind of comes off as magical Negro, but a lot of it is based off the fact that, she's played by a black girl, and in the book, Sophie's white. At least based off the visuals of the books. So Sophie, of course, is played off as white, and Agatha is played off as white. So it's kind of like translating the obvious visuals of the book and tone of the book over to the movie. It felt like it was a different connotation for Agatha to come in as the way she is as a black person, as compared to if she was cast white. It makes Agatha a more interesting and complicated character, because yes, she does come off as a magical Negro, but there's also very few instances of black girls being told that yes, you are worth it. Yes, you are not a witch. You are not evil. You are good. And a lot of times you are the purest good that is. Overall, do I think this is a good watch? I think this is a good little, kiki, good little watch for, kids. I think kids are going to eat this up. For the girlies who are really into, the young adult books, I think they're going to eat this up. I felt like overall, while I like this movie, I was not the target demographic for it, and that's completely okay. And I feel like a lot of people will feel the same way if they're older, but I don't think that was the point. This is a good streaming movie. I give it maybe, I think on Letterboxd, I rated it like a 3.5. So I'll give it like a 3.5. It was enjoyable watch one time. Do I see myself watching it again? No, not really. But it'll be fine. Yeah, it's fine to watch at least once. If anything else, for the performances from the actors, that was probably the compliment of it, even though the story wasn't the best. So, and the CGI. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you some more. And subscribe. Please tell me what you think of it. Please tell me what you think of everything else on my channel. And if you want to, I also have a podcast, Host of Horrors, with my friend Heath. We're on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, but we have a whole backlog of episodes. If you want to listen to or watch them, you can. I also have a short film, Broken Boy, which is also on YouTube, directed by me. So watch that. Tell me what you think of that. And until then, this is Jay from CC Studios, and you have a nice one.